Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Stephen King podcast, another bonus episode and with another writer. And this time I have with me first-time novelist Paul Bahou. Hello, Paul. How are you doing?
Hey, Lou. How you doing, bud?
Not too bad. And you have written your first novel, and we're going to get into that. But why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
My name's Paul Bahou. I'm an Aries. I like long walks on the beach. I don't know. I'm 39 years old. I used to play in a rock band. Now I don't. I write books. By day, I run a recycling company with my brother. And by night, I work on novels after my kids are asleep.
Okay.
Yeah, my favorite band is Tool. My favorite movie is The Big Lebowski. And I've got...
Very cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I got a pretty positive outlook on life. That's me. What's up?
All right. Very good. So were you a big reader growing up, or were you always interested in writing? Like how did those two work out for you?
Oh, yeah. I've always been into writing. My first stab at it, I used to try to write stories in elementary school, and they were really terrible, obviously. Mm-hmm. I won my 6th grade writing contest for short fiction. I was a grant writer for 10 years. I wrote the politics column for a punk magazine called Smash Magazine out here on the West Coast.
Oh, okay.
For 3 or 4 years. So I've always done writing in different ways. And after my last band broke up in 2015, the band was called The Infamous They. It was a fun band I had with my wife and my brother. And, we put out one record, and then the band fell apart. But after that, I was trying to get a new band together, and I just couldn't. It was very difficult to find people who were both consistent and good at their instrument. And eventually I just said, forget this. I'm going to write that novel that I've always talked about writing. And so I made the jump from music to being a novelist. And it's definitely been great.
I'm just curious, is the brother that was in the band, is he the same one that you're running your company with?
That's right. Yeah. Wow. My brother Dan,
So you're still a good...
Oh, yeah. We're really close.
Okay, good.
That's good. We take recycled bottles and we grind them up and we wash them and we turn them into intermediary feedstock product that replaces virgin resin that's oil based. So we're competing with the oil guys and trying to get those bottles turned into new stuff. Cool. So it's really fun. We really like it.
All right. Okay. So your writing desires, I guess, did you have formal education in writing or?
No. I mean, I took a creative writing class in college. Right. I got my degree in political science, which requires a tremendous amount of writing.
Right.
But it's not creative writing, although you do have to get kind of creative when you're kind of crafting your arguments and all that stuff.
Right. And in the band, were you one of the songwriters?
Yeah, in the first band, it was very collaborative. And in this, I had a band called Inverse that was touring a lot, and it was more of a collaborative writing process. And with The Infamous They, I wrote the whole catalog. I wrote all the songs and taught everyone what to play, and was the ringleader of the whole outfit, which is simultaneously satisfying and incredibly frustrating. So,
not being musically inclined, I'll take your word for it. Though I don't know if you've had a chance to yet, but to catch the Get Back sessions that Peter Jackson put out from the Beatles, that was fantastic, and I'm sure that you could relate to that stuff.
My dad named me after Paul McCartney. When I was growing up, I really wanted to learn the guitar.
Right.
And my dad was always like, no, you must learn bass. He's Palestinian via Lebanon, so this is my really crappy, Arabic accent. But he's like, no, you must learn bass. And I was always like, no, I want to play guitar. And then one day I formed a band with my brother on drums and my friend Randy on guitar. And I was playing guitar, and we're like, I guess I should learn bass since we already have a guitarist. And so I went and told my dad, hey, Dad, I think I'm ready to play bass now. And he just his eyes lit up and he got so excited.
Right.
And then the very next day he comes back with a case and he hands me, and he opens it up, and there's like this, it's called like a Tokai. It's like a Fender jazz bass ripoff from South Korea. But it was still amazing. The thing's like heavy. It's a brick. Freaking probably gave me scoliosis. But he gives me this bass and he says, it is time to fulfill your destiny. And ever since then, bass has been my primary instrument.
Okay, very cool.
But I really wanted to watch Get Back. I was planning on watching it, just binging it this weekend. But I had a sick toddler and a sick baby. So when you have two sick kids, your plans are scrapped.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely worth watching. It's pretty fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Love the Beatles. Yeah. Arguably the best band of all time.
Arguably, agreed. Yeah. Okay. So you've obviously had this, you've done some creative writing, though in a very specialized form, music lyrics and whatnot, which is probably more akin to writing poetry than actually writing fiction. So how did you find the process of taking your creative outlets and actually putting it into a long form piece of work?
So the book, it's called Sunset Distortion, The Pyramid at the End of the World. And it was originally conceived of as a short story I wrote for a college creative writing class.
Okay.
And it was okay. It was, I wrote it for class. So I kind of just, had some wild ideas and just kind of, I'll put it in, like, the plot was half baked and everything, but it was a neat concept of just this 80s rocker guy who kind of never really fully gets there in his career. And so he's now like middle-aged and still living the dream to the best of his abilities, the best as he knows how. And he gets abducted by space aliens. And so he's sent on this like intergalactic odyssey involving space pirates and interdimensional brain leeches and all sorts of just weird, wacky ridiculousness. And then I took that story and I turned it into a comic book with a friend of mine. And we did the first issue and we started shopping it around and my artist put so much time into it, but he was just really disheartened after we got like our first rejection. And he was like, "Oh, I can't do this." I'm like, dude, this is like the first guy we talked to. What are you doing? But he took it really personally. So he's like, "I can't do this anymore." I said, "No problem, man. No big deal." And so it just sat on my laptop for a decade after that.
Right. And is it in that decade now that you came back to it, is this like a wish fulfillment, semi-autobiographical piece of work, or am I just projecting too much here? Am I reaching?
Well, yeah, I think you're reaching a little. So when I first wrote it, it was, I was a young man. I was like 21, 22 years old when I wrote it. And so it was really based off of a lot of the kind of guys that I would meet playing in a band and playing shows and meeting some of these guys who were middle-aged and still had long hair and hard partying and drinking and, all the women and everything. Like they were still living. And when you're 20, you're like, "Oh, that's so cool. I want to be you someday." And then you down the line, you get older and your body starts to hurt a little bit and it creeps and pops and suddenly your priorities change and, you get married, you start a family and go, "Wow, man, that actually doesn't sound like fun at all." And now that I'm older, I'm not quite as old as Laser. Laser's the protagonist. I'm not quite as old as Laser is yet, but it's definitely interesting to go through the story. Going through the story again as someone who was maybe on the other side of it and had a different perspective on life since that first draft was written almost 20 years ago, 18 years ago, something like that.
Right. So is this, because I'm reading this description or the plot summary and you mentioned it, so I'm going to bring it up. Is this like a cross between Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and The Big Lebowski, or?
I love those comparisons. I mean, I've had different people read it and kind of give me their thoughts on it. And I've gotten the 80s movie Heavy Metal.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I've gotten comparisons to Aeon Flux.
Okay.
I've gotten comparisons to like to Mel Brooks. I've gotten because it's definitely comedic. It's definitely a lighter side of the sci-fi genre.
Right.
It's not like hard sci-fi where, I'll go into hardcore details about the warp drive mechanics. It's like, no, it's not that book.
Right.
It is not that kind of science fiction. I think it definitely has, it has more of a tone of Spaceballs than I would say Star Wars. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Or Star Trek.
Yeah. All right. Very cool. And is this a standalone?
No, it's 5 parts. So this is book 1 of 5. Book 2, this one's the Pyramid at the End of the World. Book 2 is called Live from Valhalla, and Valhalla is it's a space station. It's like an intergalactic TV studio kind of thing. It's it's wacky. It's fun.
Very cool.
So So it's like Valhalla, because like all of the kind of the story goes that all these different races of human-esque beings. So people back in the caveman era, different humans were abducted by this alien race. Their DNA was fiddled with, and they were kind of spread amongst all these different planets as like little worker colonies. And the main primary universal human race that's out there, they're called the Olympians, and they came to Earth and were heavily influenced by like Greek and Roman culture and Egyptian culture, and then stole it and took it back and kind of. So it was like this. They're copying Earth and out there. So like all these concepts of like Valhalla and all these kinds of things. It's just human-esque space aliens.
And what's the
fun times
overarching plot of the series?
Well, so the main story, it's you have. I feel like it's my favorite kinds of science fiction. So the weird, wacky, crazy stuff is always fun, right? We all love aliens and robots and explosions and ship battles and all that stuff. It's really fun. But at the end of the day, I feel like the best stories are stories about people, like the human element, about the person's actual trials and tribulations. And this story is a story of a man named Laser, who, when we meet him at the beginning, it's a stage name. His parents did not name him Laser. But when we meet Laser, he's in this rut. He's at the worst point in his life. He's just getting hammered every night, just no personal connections, just sleeping with random people. Like, that guy that you think is awesome when you're 20, but it becomes a sad story when you're 40. And he just lives in his van behind the venue that he plays at. Like, he doesn't have any friends. His family's all dead. Like, he just doesn't have anyone. And he's just living, like, going through the motions of this rock and roll lifestyle that he thought was what he was supposed to do. And then so he gets abducted by aliens, and it breaks him out of that cycle and sends him on this journey that it goes through. It's not quite, it's a little episodic, but it also has the main overarching story. But he befriends this alien accountant named Streak, who's like this floating octopus creature, but doesn't know what an octopus is. Right. So Laser's always like referring to him as an octopus. He's like, what's an octopus? And Laser says, he's like, they look like you, but with less face. So he offers kind of like, it's fun buddy comedy where Laser's this brash, outgoing person who, has his drinking problem, and he's ridiculous and he has no trouble saying what's on his mind. But at the same time, he's aloof and will easily get into trouble if he's left to his own devices, where Streak is this hyper conscious and anxiety ridden guy who also doesn't have friends and needs a friend just as much as Laser does, even though they're coming at their need for having somebody from different directions.
Right.
And it's just meeting each other and going on this adventure together allows both of them to just grow as people. And really, that's what the overarching story is just, it's a story about becoming a better version of yourself, growing into a new version of you, and finding out what does that growth actually entail? What does it mean to become a better person? What does it mean to grow as a person? What does it mean to really be friends with someone and to just have each other's back? And
does his guitar or his music come into play at all when he's out traipsing around? Like, are the aliens into his music, or they think it's a weapon, or what?
So the wider universe, without getting too much detail and giving anything away, really. So in space, everyone speaks English.
Okay.
Human culture is a resource to be mined. So it just as American culture has taken over the world, human culture has taken over the galaxy, and it is the cultural constant. But everything is a copy of a copy. Okay. Just as you would see how Americans interpret foreign cultures and how foreign cultures might interpret American culture, there's always these weird localized twists to it, which sometimes work better than others. But fun kind of thread going through the entire series is Laser's quest to understand, why does everyone speak English in space? Like, why? Why do you all speak English? There's no universal translator, like Star Trek. There's no Babel fish like Hitchhiker's Guide. It's no, they all speak English to varying degrees of success.
Oh, that's a fantastic idea. Sure you can have a lot of fun with that.
So human music is a big deal. Right. They've kind of aped, like one of the earlier characters Laser meets is this pig girl. She's like a human pig kind of hybrid. They're like their own species out in space.
Mm-hmm.
And her name is just something like Miley Kardashian. It's just like this string of celebrity names.
Okay.
And she loves pop music. She's obsessed with Earth culture and music and movies, everything. Like, this is what they just consume out in space.
Okay.
So lasers, people look at Laser and they say like, oh, he's a human. Wow. So cool. You are, like, can I meet you? Can I be your friend? Can I get your autograph? Humans are a big deal. They are celebrities, but we don't know about that because the wider galactic union, as they're known, the Galactic Union, has scheduled Earth as a nature preserve. So it's illegal to go to Earth. So
okay,
they absorb our culture. They use it. They put their own spin on it to varying degrees of success. And humans aren't allowed, you're not allowed to go and fiddle with humans out on Earth, and kind of, gets into some of the fun details about, well, who breaks the law and what do they do, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so that's the concept, is that our culture, our music, they love it. They're all about it. Lots of music references, lots of band references, lots of jokes based on bands and music. And
right.
It's it has a lot of that in it.
Yeah, it sounds very cool. But that's a great idea. I'm curious that you mentioned that this originally started out as a short story. How did you flesh it out to become is it a 5-part series, you said?
Very, very slowly and methodically. Okay. One word at a time. Mm-hmm. It's all 5 parts are already their own multi-page treatment, so I know where the story's going to go. I know how it ends. Okay. I know who all the main villains are, the other major characters that are going to come into play, all these different threads that go through all 5 parts of the book, where they're going, and it's all there. So I get to it's kind of an open sandbox where I say, okay, this is kind of the main elements of the story, and then I just put Laser in different situations and see what happens.
At what point did you realize that you had a series on your hand? Were you into the first book at all before you felt, oh man, I got a lot of stuff here that can't fit into this one? Or did you plot it out right from the beginning that way?
Originally, it was just going to be one book. And then as I started to develop it and fill in the details, I started thinking oh, well, man, that's a really cool concept, but there's no way I'm going to be able to fit that in this story. Okay. And rather than try to just make one massive bulky volume, I'm like, no, I'm going to break it up. I'm going to make each one, try to make sure each book has a definitive beginning and ending while still giving service to the overarching storylines that run through them. So you can read the first book and you can finish it and it feels like you've read a complete story. It's not like you're immediately left on this cliffhanger and you're just like, oh shoot, I'm going to wait 2 years to figure out what happens. No, you finish that first book, you're like, okay, that's the story. Great. But it continues on. Right.
And if you were to read the second book, would you have to have read the first book?
I would definitely recommend it, just because there's, again, one of the large threads going through the story is Laser's growth as a person from this hard-partying, guy with a drinking problem and no real regard for trying to have deeper human connections or alien connections, if you will, to someone that matures and becomes a better version of himself. So, you're kind of plunking in partway through his journey, and you would definitely need to read the first one to see his character arc and development come to fruition.
Fair enough. Just like to let the readers know that going into it. So that's good. Now, it sounds to me like you're a plotter. I don't know if you're familiar with the plotter versus pantser methods of writing, but it sounds like you plan everything out ahead of time, or how does that work for you? Like with the first novel, did you write a detailed outline and then flesh it out from there?
So kind of the way I write, and I talk to other writers, and I always love getting their take on it, the process of writing, because I think it's just fascinating.
Yeah, same here.
Right? Just the creative process.
Yeah.
How people develop an idea and how it comes to fruition and the work they put in. And I people, asked me that question before, and my answer is both. Right. Where I will have an overarching story, but how I connect the dots, I just roll with it.
Right.
And so if I have these 10 major plot points, and I've talked to people and they say, oh, well, I don't even know how to get started, or I'm stuck and I've been stuck for 6 months. And I just say, abandon where you are, move later down in the story and write that part. Right. The way I write is I will envision a scene in my head down to the music that's playing in the background. Right. And I will develop and sculpt that scene. And then when that's in place, then that enables me to push the story forward. Right. And so sometimes I don't even realize, I don't really say oh, then he's going to do this, then he's going to do this, then he's going to no. I'm just saying at some point Laser gets here and he has to do this thing. So how he gets there, let's have fun with it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, but you do know what the end of the book is going to be when you start it.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
The ending of each installment is already preordained.
Right.
So it's where he ends up at the end of each book is already set. And it's just how he gets there. Mm-hmm. That's the fun part of the process is just taking your character that you've developed and almost like a friend. And you say, okay, now I'm going to put you in. Now you've been purchased on this meat market, and this giant like rhino gorilla space gladiator is going to try to feed you to his family. What's he going to do?
Right.
How you getting out of this one, bud?
Right. Okay, that's cool.
And then you just let the character be them, and it kind of, in a way, it writes itself.
Right.
I think.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Do you? This might be hard for you because you the first book you worked on off and on for over like 10 years, I guess. But once you got down to this last version of it, how long did it take you to write it?
It was 5 years. So
5 years.
In 2015, that last band broke up, and then I spent maybe 4 years. I spent like a year trying to get a new band together. I wrote the follow-up album, and it just to this day still sits on my computer. And then I was just like, I'm going to start writing. And so I took this short story, which had been turned into like, I don't know, I want to say like 20,000 word novella. And then I just started writing. Yeah, I just developed it. And so for like, it was a daily, so it wasn't like over 10 years. I was just hit and miss. Like I just wasn't really touching it. And then when I got into it, I was just very consistent. And every day I sat down and I tried to write like 500 to 1,000 words.
Okay.
And obviously that's a little more difficult when you have small children, as any parent can attest.
Yeah.
But I made it happen. I willed it into being.
Awesome.
And I published it like a week after my son was born this year. So I told my wife, I'm like, hey, it looks like we both gave birth, huh?
Somehow, I hope she appreciated the comparison. I don't think it's quite the same, but maybe.
Yeah, she lives with me. She gets my sense of humor. And good. I told her besides, and even if my jokes ever fall flat, you sign a contract that says you have to love me forever. So
there you go.
Even when I'm not funny, you have to smile. There you go. It's just like, no, I don't.
Yeah. Okay, so your first book is out now, and you mentioned that you're working on the second book, or is it? Where are you in that process?
I'm about 60K words in.
Okay.
Once I have my writing process is I will write the story first. And then after the story is kind of there from A to Z, then I will go through and I'll do a pass through where, I work on my descriptors.
Right.
Trying to flesh out the scene, trying to add some color to the language. And then from there, it's like, okay, now that I have like the thing all fleshed out, now I'll go through and see if there's any, anything doesn't make sense. He opens the door with his left hand, but now suddenly he's doing, what I mean?
Right.
Like someone like that kind of, I think it's called blocking, right? Is that the term for it?
Yep.
Yeah. I try to do a round of blocking, and then I'll go through it again, and I'll do another round of polish, and I'll get that. And then I'll go through it and say, okay, now that the story is here, how can I shorten it? And I will just take my pruning shears to it and try to say everything. I try to say it in as few words as possible.
Right.
I try not to be overly indulgent when it comes to writing. I want to make it as easy to read as possible. I want this to be the kind of book that someone who isn't a major reader can actually get through it and enjoy it and not just have their eyes cross.
Right. Yep, for sure.
So, and then after that, then I'll take it to a professional editing service, and then I'll go through it again. And I mean, this first novel, I went through it probably 10 times.
Right.
Start to finish, doing a different task each time through.
Right. Do you use beta readers?
Yeah, I've had beta readers, and I have some friends who will read what I send them, and they'll give me their feedback. And you can't just write it yourself and assume that it's perfect.
Right.
No way. You need the feedback. You're gonna miss something, because even if in your head something makes sense, not everyone else lives in your head, so they're gonna need to be able to understand it. So if they're confused, it's on you, the writer, to make sure that it's not confusing. So we say, hey, I don't understand this detail. Okay, well, let me make it clearer. Oh, I don't understand this character. What's their deal? Oh, let me flesh out their motivation a little bit. And I think that that's a invaluable step that you cannot skip as a writer.
Right. Did you ever have, I assume some of your beta readers are probably non-musicians. Did you ever find that you were, just because that's the world you lived in, you were using musical terms or whatever, or industry slang that some people would come back and say, I don't know what you really mean by this? Or
yeah, I really try not to use jargon.
Right. Okay.
So the references are all things that anyone with any passing familiarity with music will understand.
Okay.
And even then, like, you know, there's some references to various bands and some, maybe a few might be a little obscure, but hey, if they're talking about, if Laser Streaker have a BS session and they're talking about a band and you haven't heard about them, go check them out.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Maybe you'll discover something new that you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to ask you this because you are a musician. Do you have audiobook versions of these? Or are you planning to do that? Yeah,
you know, I have so many different things I want to do with this. Like I've been writing short fiction also, and just writing this book has really lit the fire for just my writing in general. And so I have a website that I'm currently developing now. I have a couple of people that are putting it together. Right now, I'm just going off of my Paul Bahou Writes Facebook page, which lowest bare minimum you could do as a creative person, right?
Yeah.
But I got a website in the hopper, and that's they're working on that, and it's going to be for just the different stuff I write. So not just this book, but all my short fiction I've been putting up, and one of the things I do want to do is have an audiobook, but get in line, right?
Yeah, for sure. Right. And do you foresee yourself doing that, or would you hire somebody to do that?
I actually had someone reach out to me and offer to do it and make it and produce it. And then I gave him the book, and he said, "Oh, I don't think I have the proper voice for this."
Oh, well.
And I'm like, "Yeah, it's very specific. I think, you know, you have to have the right tone and everything for this kind of book, because it's humorous side of, but it's also, it can get kind of messy and gory and stuff too. It's definitely some space alien violence in there, for sure. Some Army of Darkness, you know, Evil Dead level, like spoofy gore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In that world.
When you were writing the story and you were a laser, were you picturing a certain musician that you like, or yourself? As if somebody were to play this character, he'd be like a Jim Morrison or maybe somebody from Tool. I think that you said that was your favorite band.
Oh, yeah, I love Tool. Oh man, do you like Tool?
I've heard a bit of them.
Oh man,
not a lot. They're different. I don't mind. I mean, I'm older than you, so I'm more of a Beatles Rush. So. Oh
well, if you like Rush, imagine Rush, but just like really heavy.
Yeah.
Because they go off on weird. I mean, they got like 10-minute long songs, and you know about weird, wild.
Rush does that too. So
I mean, if you like, it's just on the heavier end of the prog rock spectrum. Right?
Yeah.
No, so this character is kind of an amalgamation of several people I know.
Okay.
One of them he was this guy named Ross Torlak. He's since passed away, but he was my dad's best friend.
Okay.
He helped teach me how to play the bass and guitar, and he played in a heavy metal band and kept playing. Except he actually owned his own business and did stuff, so he wasn't like a total degenerate. Maybe in his own ways, right?
That's where your character is going to get to.
yeah, right. But him and several other people and other influences. I always joked. I was like, if I ever had like if there was ever a movie done, like I would want what's the guy that plays Uncle Jesse from Full House?
Oh, okay. Oh, Bob Saget? No,
not Bob Saget. The other guy. What's his name?
Oh, yeah, the guy with the hair. Oh, I know who you mean. I can't say the name off the top of my head.
That guy.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So yeah, you mentioned you write short stories as well. Is that what genre do you write those in? Do you go across genres?
I will go across every genre. So I've written a few short stories in the last couple of months. They were both. One of them was like an Edgar Allan Poe type, like spooky poetry, and then one was like an outright horror genre.
Okay.
And then I also wrote a children's book.
Wow.
That I'm currently developing as well. So yeah, why limit yourself?
Yeah, for
go
sure.
And whatever inspires you, follow it. Yeah. Whatever path, whatever door opens, go through it. Don't limit yourself. Just explore what's out there. And you know, again, I think when it comes to writing or when it comes to music or any kind of creative outlet, just leave yourself open to what you can do. Don't close yourself off because you say, oh, well, I see myself as a heavy metal musician, or I see myself as an abstract painter, or I see myself as someone who only writes chipper musicals. Like, get out of your element, get out of your comfort zone, try something different, tell a different kind of story, see what works for you. And obviously we have our things that we'll fall back into, or the things that we're comfortable. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with like having a genre you like, but by all means, explore the world out of it as well.
Right. Very cool. Do you have favorite authors?
Yeah. I mean, I think my favorite author of all time is Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I just think that guy was brilliant.
For sure.
You mentioned Hitchhiker's Guide. I love Douglas Adams. I do think that this story has heavy Hitchhiker's Guide influence, obviously, because it's about a human that gets abducted by aliens. And it's a person that isn't necessarily your typical cocksure action adventure guy.
Yep.
Like, it's not that guy.
Right.
Laser is not that guy. Half the time he's in outer space. He's looking around like, what? Huh? Just doesn't pay attention, zones out, definite ADHD. It definitely has that aspect where, you get pulled into like this outer space world, but it definitely doesn't have the same flavor as a lot of other science fiction. I feel like it's its own unique thing. It's
cool.
It's definitely not like Star Trek. It's not like Star Wars or anything like that.
Yeah, it's all you. Very good. So you're currently working on the next book, and I'm sorry you may have said this, but when do you plan to? What's the release date for that, or do you have one yet?
It will be released when it is ready to be released.
Okay, good answer.
I'm making great progress on it, and. But I won't put it out until I put it through my process. I'm not going to rush it, but my general idea is into next year.
Okay.
I'm hoping to have like the draft done in the next like 6 months, and then get 6 months of editing.
Okay. That sounds pretty intense.
Kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Right.
If I miss it, I miss it. Right. No big deal.
All right. Cool.
As it goes. I got a question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we touched on the Beatles earlier. What is your favorite Beatles song?
Oh, geez, I can't just pick one. That's impossible. I mean, it depends what mood I'm in. Like if I like their rock and stuff, the early stuff. But I think the later stuff, maybe like Across the Universe or A Day in the Life. The Sgt. Pepper album is pretty fantastic. So yeah, there's just it's like asking me what's my favorite Stephen King book. I can't give just one answer. It's impossible.
Did you ever hear? There's this band called the Easy Star All Stars, and they are they're fantastic. They're like a reggae band, and they do full album cover.
Oh, okay, no, I haven't heard
cover
of
albums.
No.
And they did Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Dub Band, and it is a full recreation of Sgt. Pepper's as a reggae album.
Oh, cool!
And it is amazing. And reggae, I'm not a huge reggae guy,
right?
But wow, it's great. They get Toots Hubbard from Toots and the Maytals. Oh no, wait, no, was that in this one or no? I think I'm thinking of the Radiohead. They did Radio Dread for OK Computer. They did Dub Side of the Moon for Dark Side of the Moon.
Okay.
It is one Beatles fan to another. Give it a listen. Go on Spotify. Check it out.
Okay.
You're going to smile.
Okay. Thanks for the recommendation.
I think it's like, it's the Beatles, except it's bong rips instead of acid tabs. So
very cool. Okay. Well, that's all the questions I had. Yeah. As you mentioned, you just have a Facebook page. So I will put that link in the show notes, as well as where they can find your book. It's on Amazon and all other sorts of outlets, I assume.
Yes, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the good stuff. Yep. Although I did want to ask you one Stephen King related question, being this is the Stephen King podcast.
Right.
But you already said you can't do it. But what is your favorite movie adaptation?
That's easy.
Adaptation of a Stephen King
That's
work?
easy because it's my favorite movie. I also think it's the best movie ever made. That's The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, it's a great one.
Yeah, for sure.
Although, didn't they say that it would be impossible for him to actually crawl through the sewage pipe, that huffing those fumes all the way out, he'd die somewhere in there?
Yeah. How about you?
Right. But with Stephen King, you have to definitely suspend your disbelief. I mean, if you can write a story about a station wagon that is actually an alien that eats people, then, but you don't crawl on your way through,
even in that story, like your story, that book is all about the people that work at that police station. So it's all about the characters.
It always comes down to the characters.
Right.
Always. It's all about the characters. And that's why I tell people, like, my favorite adaptation is The Mist.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Oh man, the ending on that one in the movie version. Oh Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, to this day, I feel like one of the most excruciating movie endings of all time.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I'm ambivalent on it. I liked it the first time, but I'm such a big fan of the novella. I prefer the open ending of the novella. But yeah, for a piece of cinema, that's quite the gut punch for sure.
Yeah, no one ever makes movies like that. You know, they throw so much money into it.
Yeah.
So you did not see that coming. I was like, oh wow. But I definitely love that concept. Whenever some kind of parallels to the Sunset Distortion is they both have a bit of alternate dimensional reality, portal-y type stuff,
right,
going on. So whenever I did a lot to prepare to make sure that this part of the book was as accurate as possible, which, who knows, this is all like speculative physics anyways, right? Just smoked a lot of took a lot of bong rips and watched a lot of videos on string theory. And, I think I pieced it together as good as one can.
Yeah. Today's quantum physics is today's version of gamma radiation. It solves a lot of problems.
Well, it opens up so many ideas that you can just run with. In terms of fiction, you can just take it any direction. And, when you get into alternate dimensions and by the time you get to 10th dimension, it's just like, there's a galaxy out there somewhere where we're all mushroom people.
Everybody's building their multiverses.
Yeah. Right.
Marvel.
I know that it's not old hat yet, but it's probably going to get there. But also when it comes to the multiverse stuff, I try to approach it from a different tack a little bit. Which
is good. A little goes a long way with that kind of stuff for me, because it gets to, if you're not careful with it, then it's kind of like time travel or magic. You get to a point where something terrible is going to happen, but you're just sitting there saying, but they're just going to magic their way out of it. So there's no tension. So you have to use that stuff sparingly, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. I really don't enjoy when character. One of my pet peeves in writing is when things happen by coincidence. Like, I hate that. Like, no. Give me a reason why this is happening.
Even though it does happen in real life, but in fiction it doesn't work.
It doesn't work quite as well. There needs to be some. And the thing is, like, okay, just go back earlier in your story. Give you some foreshadowing. You can fix it pretty easy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Okay, Paul, it's been a blast, and I wish you all the best and success with your books. And when you get the next one done, come back on, and we'll see what you've done to Poor Laser.
Thank you, Lou. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Take care. All right. Be talking to you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.